Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Attention Span Labs. I'm your host, Mike, and this video is going to be about the book you see on your left, After Man, A Zoology of the Future by Dougal Dixon, and how you can use it in tabletop role-playing games. So this is not a channel about Warhammer, despite the first two videos. It's not a channel about wargaming, despite the first three videos. Although I am going to talk about those things. I'm going to talk about a lot of other things as well. So when I say it's not about those things, I mean it is, but it's not strictly about those things. So this will be a first video. It'll talk about a different kind of gaming, specifically tabletop role-playing gaming, in the context of using this very cool book, After Man, The Zoology of the Future, as a bestiary for fantasy or science fiction or whatever other kind of role-playing games. Now, I'll talk briefly about this book in the context of how I was exposed to it, and that I've been searching for it for an awful long time and only got it recently. But when I was in my early teens, when I would be at home in the summer, when school was over, I would watch a lot of the Sci-Fi Channel, and I'd watch the Hour of Dark Shadows every morning, followed by whatever rotating stuff was on their schedule. And one of the times they showed the old Ripley's Believe It or Not series with Jack Palance as the host. This was before the Dean Cain Superman version that was on TBS or whatever. I don't know what channel this was originally broadcast on, but it was, by that time it was 15, 16 years old already, because it came on in the early 80s. And it was on the reruns on the Sci-Fi Channel. And one particularly memorable episode, they showed some kind of museum exhibit that was actually based on this book. And they had these creatures made out of, like they were taxidermied, I guess. Obviously not real animals, but in particular was this horrifying giant bat thing that ran on two legs, but the legs it ran on were in the front, and it had like these grasping paws in the back that came around the top of the shoulder, and it was this giant terrestrial bat called a night stalker. And I had missed half the segment. I don't know why, if it was just because I had walked out of the room, or maybe I woke up from a nap or something and it was on. And I mainly caught that part, and I was, I don't know, maybe 12 years old at the time, and I thought now that's really cool. That's a really cool thing. And I think they mentioned that this was part of this book. And I don't remember the context in which this sort of pseudo-zoological exhibit was put on. Years later, I think I found out it might have been in Japan or something like that. But they mentioned it was based on this book, and the premise of this book was, well, what would the Earth look like 50 million years in the future, after man is gone? And what sort of animals would evolve to take their place, to take the place of the animals that exist today, in a world without man. And this was, if you read this book, and we'll flip through it in a bit, but if you read this book, you'll see that the author had, sorry about the crinkling, those are my cats stepping on some bags on the floor. But if you read the book, Dougal Dixon goes into explaining that this wasn't a polemic about man needing to be destroyed, or it wasn't a grim post-apocalyptic thing. He was just saying, I want to imagine how life would be if with man gone, because otherwise, man is such a dominant force on the planet. It would control, what sort of organisms survived, and things of that nature. So this looks at how they might have. Sorry, my cat Volando is hitting the tripod. What was I saying? Oh, yes, the how these animals would evolve on their own in biomes, taking the place of animals that were basically controlled by man, and the biomes that were previously ruled by men, and other animals were kept out. And it's a pretty compelling read. If you found, I'm sure you've probably run into other books like this. You probably saw that series on, was it Animal Planet or Discovery Channel years ago, called The Future is Wild, which is basically the same idea. I think Dougal Dixon may have even contributed to that. I didn't like that too much. I thought the CGI was kind of dumb, but there's great illustrations in this book, and I think this is a much better offering than that. And we'll go through it, but a large part of it is actually layman's explanations of biological evolution and convergent evolution, and sort of the geographic time scale, and what makes an animal successful, and stuff like that. But my main focus, as I said, is on getting ideas from this book and using it in tabletop role-playing games, because there's some really great animals, and if you're tired of the standard D&D bestiary, which is basically entirely normal animals, but also some really far out stuff that Gary Gygax pulled out of Ultraman or whatever. This is a very cool antidote to that, and I'll go through some of my favorite examples. Okay, so starting near the beginning of the book, we run into the rabucks, which are basically deer rabbits, or deer llama, deer sheep. And it also introduces one of the primary conceits of the book, that rodents really have an explosion, because the sort of animals that are dying out when man is gone, whatever happened to man, it never bothers to say, are the ones that basically were domesticated by man, that relied on men for everything, or that whose populations were carefully controlled by men, and they couldn't really adapt as well. They were, for lack of a better word, engineered by men for their particular purpose. But rodents, which man could never really completely wipe out, though they tried to, were so plentiful, and they reproduced so prodigiously that they really spread into all these ecological niches. And rabbits are the first example here, and some of them become large deer-type organisms, which, of course, if you're playing fantasy role-playing games, you often need to hunt things in the field. This is not a monster that's going to threaten your party necessarily, unless maybe you're driving down a dark road at night in the summer and it jumps in front of you. But still, it's a nice animal that could thematically set the scene for the different biological diversity of your game. That this is indeed taking place in a different world. On the next page, we have some of the rat descendant predators called the phalanx. Now, these are going to be your wolf or wildcat stand-ins. It specifically says the phalanx are quite dog-like in form. They have sort of the rat dentition. Actually, they kind of remind me of the viper wolves from Avatar, the James Cameron movie. I wonder if the viper wolves were, without the extra legs, of course. I wonder if they were sort of taken, if some of the animals in that were taken from inspiration from this. But that actually leads me into a discussion of how you could use this book. Obviously, it doesn't make much sense to try to role play in a world where man's extinct. So how I would imagine these creatures being used is they're either just the normal creatures on this fantasy world, which is different from Earth, or it could be a sci-fi setting. It could be a far, far distant future post-apocalyptic setting. It could be something where genetic engineering has created a wide variety of different species that are derivatives of things we know now. They could have been used as terraforming efforts on other planets. It could be a Jack Vancian dying Earth kind of thing, where this is, hundreds of millions of years in the future, maybe mankind left the planet. This is what kind of creatures were left when men returned. Something like that. So you have a lot of different options you could use it in, even if it's, just simply saying, hey, this is a straight fantasy setting and I want to have some different creatures. In addition to just having goblins and kobolds and owlbears, I want the normal fauna that people run into to be distinct from Earth as well. Moving on a couple pages, you can see some arboreal animals, tree-dwelling mammals, like the chirrut, something that, again, is not going to threaten your party. It's not going to provide any kind of XP or anything like that. But you can use it to describe the fauna you see as you're walking through the forest, kind of weasels, squirrel, foxes, and maybe your party hunts them because their beautiful red fur is quite valuable, like a mink coat or something like that. This is page 3. You can see some of the really very pretty artwork. Some of the animals you may find more believable than others. The reed stilt is kind of a stretch for me. But now we get into a large herbivorous mammals that, although they're not going to hunt you to eat you, are still a threat because they're quite large, and approaching them in the wild, or especially trying to hunt them, or if they're in rutting mating season, you approach one of their young, they're liable to rampage with a flying headbutt or something like that to deal an awful lot of damage to one of your adventurers. But these might also be domesticated. As you see as we go on, some of them look rather like yaks or water buffaloes. You can see them being used in maybe by mountain tribes or so forth. They use their hair or their wool, not to mention their meat. Maybe some of them are used for milk, like cow. Here's some more carnivorous predatory rats, the pamphret. You use it as a sort of smaller wolf-like creature, coyote. The chiselhead down at the bottom here. See if we can zoom in on it, get a balance the color a bit. But this could be something that is a threat to your houses and structures. It's a pest that you want to eradicate. It because, hey, it's boring holes in my roof. It's maybe you're hired by the town to exterminate them because they're causing so much damage to everybody's house. The D&D adventuring party as exterminators. Now we're getting to some really interesting, very large and dangerous creatures. The Bartolot here are basically saber-toothed polar bears that are derived from rats. You could use them exactly as either saber-toothed cats or polar bears, as you would in your D&D campaign. The woolly gigantolopes, again, like something like yaks or elephants, woolly mammoths. Perhaps you can ride them. Stock them for food. They might be war mounts of a barbarian tribe, a barbarian nation that's invading you. Sort of, maybe it's the first time you've run into them, like Hannibal crossing the Alps with the elephants, and the soldiers of the city you're defending have all scampered in terror of these giant furry horned creatures stomping down on them. Jumping ahead a bit, we'll get to some of the ocean creatures. I'm not going to go through the entire book. Really should buy it and check it out. I'll have a link in the bottom. You can buy it on Amazon at no cost, and it would support me at no cost to you. I mean, you'll pay a cost buying the book, but Amazon will throw a bit of money my way if you get interested and buy it through there. Here you have the vortex and porpin, which are basically cetacean type convergent evolutions of penguins. So again, you use these on whale hunts, or maybe some of them are sapient, intelligent allies you can call upon in your ocean campaigns. Some more predatory rats, strange pyramid-headed herbivores. Maybe their horns are worth something. Maybe they're ground down to make aphrodisiacs or some sort of potions. There are some really horrifyingly ugly creatures. Probably completely non-threatening. They look pretty lazy, but might be scary enough to be worth changing up their disposition to make them aggressive. Okay, now we're going to get into some of the probably more interesting animals that you'll be able to use as predators to throw at your party. Here we have the Horain and the Raboons, which are both evolutions of primates that evolved into predatory roles. Raboons, obviously, some sort of derivation of the baboon. And because they're primates, they're going to be social animals. They probably work cooperatively, making them very canny and dangerous predators, even if they don't have any sort of technology. Doesn't look like they have the ability to grasp things or to manipulate tools, but maybe they can. Even shows some of them on the page on the left here, walking bipedally. Imagine they would be very dangerous predators in their home biome. Here's another dangerous predator. This one, arboreal. This one I think is particularly interesting. The striger mentions how this was actually evolved from some of the last cats. Arboreal animals were often, especially the monkeys, were often safe from prey because prey couldn't get up there after them. But cats can climb trees, and these ones were particularly well suited to it. And they developed a physiology better suited for preying on creatures in trees. So you have this sort of monkey tree tiger, thought of which is terrifying to any sane person. And finally, we're going to jump ahead to the real gold of this book, the island of Batavia, the land of bats, with the dreaded night stalker, which I mentioned being so impressed by in the beginning of the video. You can see it there on the left, a giant, horrifying looking thing. Would be a terrifying foe to fight just as a wild animal, but in my imagination, it could be trained as a mount, a cavalry steed, if they're sufficiently large. These would be the things that your real bad guys ride on. Yeah, instead of like velociraptors or demonic horses or whatever, they ride night stalkers. And you can imagine them charging down with a lance and sword swinging while the night stalker is ripping you to shred with its teeth and holding on to you and screaming its terrifying echolocating cry. It mentions that their eyes are basically atrophied, but they hunt by echolocation, so they would be terrific predators at night, very, very hard to shake, and a really scary surprise to spring on your party if they're uncareful walking through the woods alone. All right, so that brings us just about to the end of the book. That was After Man, A Zoology of the Future by Dougal Dixon. I hope you'll check out the link in the bottom. Check it out on Amazon. It's a really cool book. Probably the first in the speculative biology genre. And it inspires a lot of cool ideas, whether you use it for role-playing or writing fiction, or you just like to draw interesting new kinds of animals. Definitely worth checking out. I think it was printed originally in like 1981. This is the 2017 or 2018 reprint. All right, so that covers that. If you like this video, please give it a like, a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, if you want to see more of this kind of thing. And click the little bell icon so you're notified. And if you want to support me and encourage me to keep making these kinds of videos. Please check out some of my books. I'm an author with 6 published illustrated novels and short stories of heroic adventure fiction. After Dark is one of them right there. You can find them on Amazon. There'll be links in the description. Until next time, this is Mike from Attention Span Labs, signing off.